My mother charged rich men $50,000 to hunt me for sport. My mother taught me the value of my own life in the stark, brutal currency of a business transaction. To her, I was a high-end bespoke product, a unique experience to be marketed to a select clientele. My life was worth exactly $50,000 per hunt. I was 13 years old the first time she drove me out to the property, a sprawling, 3-square-mile tract of dense, unforgiving woods she had inherited from her father. She told me we were going camping, a lie so absurd, so out of character for a woman who considered a chipped nail a personal crisis, that it should have been my first warning. The real alarm bells started ringing when she pulled the car over on a deserted dirt road and made me change out of my jeans and sneakers and into a pair of torn, threadbare clothes that smelled of mildew and fear. Then, she took my shoes. "You're going to run through those trees until the nice man catches you," she said, her voice a mask of cheerful, maternal instruction. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger towards a figure in the distance, a man in full camouflage gear, methodically loading a bolt into a high-powered crossbow. "If you make it to the main road before the sundown timer goes off, we get paid. If you don't run fast enough," she added, her smile never wavering, "we don't get paid. Understand?" I thought it was a joke, a sick, twisted, and terrifyingly unfunny prank. But then she shoved me, hard, toward the dense, dark tree-line, and the man in camouflage began to count down from 10, his voice a low, predatory boom that echoed through the silent woods. I ran. I ran with the blind, mindless terror of a cornered animal, the branches whipping at my face, the sharp rocks and thorns on the forest floor tearing my bare feet to shreds. Arrows, silent and deadly, whistled past my head, thudding into the trees around me. I found a hollow log and crawled inside, pulling leaves and dirt over the opening, my body trembling with a fear so profound it was a physical vibration. I lay there for 3 hours, listening to him stomp around, his heavy boots crunching on the dry leaves, his voice a low, taunting growl as he called me his little rabbit. When the sundown timer, a shrill, electronic buzz, finally sounded, my mother collected her envelope of cash from him, her face a mask of polite, professional satisfaction. On the drive home, she told me I did good, but that next time, I needed to make it more exciting for the client. "Give them a real chase," she advised, as if she were a sports coach giving me pointers on my performance. "Make them feel like they earned it." Then she stopped at a McDonald's drive-thru, her demeanor as casual and unconcerned as if we were coming home from a soccer practice instead of a staged, near-fatal hunt where I was the main attraction. The hunts became a regular, horrifying fixture of my life, a monthly ritual of terror and survival. The clients were always different, a rotating cast of wealthy, bored men with a taste for the exotic and the depraved. The weapons changed, too. Some were given rifles with non-lethal but incredibly painful rubber bullets. Some were given bows. Some, the ones who craved a more primal experience, were given only a knife and their own 2 hands. My mother, in her new role as my handler and promoter, began to train me with a chilling, almost scientific, detachment. She taught me evasion tactics, how to zigzag through the trees to make myself a harder target, how to double back on my own trail to confuse my pursuers. She taught me how to use the thick, cloying mud from the creek bed as camouflage, how to control my breathing, to swallow my gasps of fear, so I wouldn't give away my position. She bought used military survival manuals from a dusty, forgotten corner of the internet and made me memorize them, quizzing me on the best ways to build a makeshift shelter or find a source of clean water. "You're worth nothing to me dead, sweetheart," she'd say, her voice a mixture of maternal concern and cold, hard business acumen as she drew escape routes on a topographical map of the property. "So don't screw up and die." I tried to run away, once after the 4th hunt. I had a small bag packed, a pathetic collection of stolen snacks and a few dollars I had managed to squirrel away. But she was always one step ahead of me. She called me into her office, a room that had once been my playroom, and showed me a series of photographs she had taken of me, pictures of me changing into the torn, hunting clothes, cropped and angled to look salacious and inappropriate. "I tell the police you're a troubled runaway, that you've been selling yourself on the streets," she explained, her voice calm and reasonable. "And with these photos, who do you think they're going to believe? A respected, single mother, or a delinquent, promiscuous teenager? You'll end up right back here," she added, her smile a thin, cruel line. "But there won't be any more hunts. I'll just sell you to the highest bidder, no running required." The threat, in its cold, calculated brutality, was enough. I was trapped. I tried to tell a teacher, a kind, well-meaning woman who had noticed the dark circles under my eyes and my increasing withdrawal. But my mother had already laid the groundwork for my disbelief. She had been to the school, had tearful, concerned meetings with my guidance counselor, painting a picture of me as a pathological liar with a history of violent and frankly, disturbing fantasies. She had even, in a move of pure Machiavellian genius, found a therapist, a quack with a questionable license, who, for a price, was more than willing to create a thick file documenting my delusions about being hunted for sport. The cover story was so thorough, so well-crafted, that the real story, in its raw, unbelievable horror, sounded like the ravings of a deeply disturbed child. No one believed me. By hunt number 8, a grim, twisted kind of expertise had taken root in me. I was no longer just a terrified child running for her life. I was a survivor. I had become a creature of the woods, my senses honed to a razor's edge. I knew which trees had the lowest branches, the easiest to climb. I knew where the ground was soft enough to not leave a clear footprint. I knew how to use the cold, fast-moving water of the creek to mask my scent. I had even, in a desperate act of self-preservation, turned the tables on my hunters. I had found an old, rusted bear trap on the property, and with a strength born of pure adrenaline, had managed to reset it, luring one of the hunters into it and listening, with a strange, detached satisfaction, to his screams of agony as the metal teeth tore through his leg. Another hunter, a particularly arrogant and clumsy one, I had managed to get to shoot himself in the foot by creating a diversion and then circling back on my own trail, a tactic I had learned from one of my mother's military manuals. My mother, far from being horrified by this escalation, was thrilled. She saw it as a marketing opportunity. She began to charge a premium for the experienced prey, branding me as a real challenge for the more discerning and bloodthirsty of her clients. She invested in a series of night vision cameras, installing them throughout the woods, opening up the possibility of longer, more terrifying, and more lucrative overnight hunts. Hunt number 10 was the one that almost broke me. The client was different. He was ex-military, his movements silent and efficient, his eyes cold and devoid of the drunken, sadistic glee of the others. He wasn't playing a game. He caught me in the first hour, his hand clamping over my mouth from behind, his other arm a steel band around my chest, cutting off my air. The only reason I survived was because I had the presence of mind to go limp, to play dead, a trick I had learned from watching nature documentaries in the school library. He had choked me until I lost consciousness, and when I came to, he was gone, my mother standing over me, a look of annoyance on her face that I had ended the hunt so early. Hunt number 11 was an old, wheezing banker with a diagnosed heart condition. It should have been an easy one, but he had brought his own, unique set of rules. He wasn't interested in the chase. He didn't want to catch me. He wanted to wound me, to watch me bleed, to watch me crawl. His arrow, fired from a low-powered, but still deadly, crossbow, went through the fleshy part of my calf. The pain was a white-hot, searing agony, but I managed to pull the bolt out, pack the wound with mud and leaves, and keep moving, his taunting laughter echoing behind me. I still have the scar, a pale, puckered reminder of his particular brand of cruelty. After that hunt, something inside me finally, irrevocably, snapped. I confronted my mother, my own voice a low, dangerous snarl that I didn't recognize. "I'm done," I told her. "I won't do it anymore. You can just kill me yourself if you want the money so badly." She just laughed, that same, cold, tinkling sound that had become the soundtrack to my nightmares. She pulled out her phone and showed me the bookings she had already taken for the following month. "Next month is a special one, baby," she said, her eyes glittering with a new, even more terrifying, level of excitement. A group hunt. 5 men, various weapons, and last girl standing. She had found another girl, another product to add to her inventory. "Either you both make it out," she explained, her voice a cheerful, business-like chirp, "or neither of you does. They're paying for blood this time, sweetheart. A lot of it." She showed me a picture of the other girl. She couldn't have been more than 11. With wide, terrified eyes and a face that was already a mask of a trauma I knew all too well. She had been trafficked, I knew it instantly. My mother, in her relentless, sociopathic pursuit of profit, had partnered with people even worse than herself. Her business was expanding. And I was now not only a victim, but an unwilling accomplice. That was the moment I stopped planning for my survival and started planning for war. During the supply runs my mother would send me on, I began to steal. A roll of high-tensile fishing line from the hardware store. A pack of box cutter blades from the office supply aisle. I spent my days in the woods, not just practicing my escape routes, but setting traps. I sharpened branches into crude, but effective, pungy sticks. I identified which plants, when crushed, would create a skin-blistering poison. The morning of hunt number 13, my mother drove me out to the property early to walk the course, a final review of the terrain before the clients arrived. While she sat in the car, her head bent over her phone as she calculated her potential profits, I made my final preparations, my heart a cold, hard, and steady drum in my chest. The other girl, whose name I would later learn was Arabella, Arrived at sunset, a small, trembling bird delivered by a handler whose dead eyes held no flicker of humanity. I tried to catch her eye, to offer a silent message of solidarity, but she was too terrified to look at anyone. My mother, with a brisk, almost cheerful, efficiency, made us both strip and change into matching, flimsy white dresses, a cruel, practical choice to make us more visible in the darkness. She then lined us up, 2 sacrificial lambs, for the hunter's inspection. There were 5 of them, a grotesque collection of middle-aged men, their faces flushed with alcohol and anticipation. They passed a bottle of expensive whiskey between them, their laughter aloud, braying sound as they made bets on who would bag which girl first. One of them, a man with a compound bow and a leering, reptilian smile, couldn't stop staring at Arabella, his lips wet, his eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger that made my stomach turn. I memorized each face, each weapon, each casual, cruel remark. As my mother reached the final, booming numbers of her countdown, I grabbed Arabella's small, cold hand. "Follow me if you want to live," I whispered, my voice a low, urgent command. And then the horn sounded, its mournful, hunting call blast echoing through the darkening woods, and we ran. Behind us, I heard the satisfying, metallic click of weapons being loaded, the whoops and hollers of men who believed they were on a safari. Ahead of us was a 3-square-mile wilderness that I knew better than the back of my own scarred and bloodied hand. And for the first time in 13 hunts, I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the goddamn welcoming committee. The horn's blast was still a fading echo in the twilight as I squeezed Arabella's hand 3 times, a prearranged, if hastily communicated, signal. She flinched, her small body jerking as if I had shocked her. But she followed without question as I pulled her sharply to the left, away from the main trail and towards the dark, whispering woods that bordered the creek. Her palm was so slick with a cold, terrified sweat that it kept slipping from my grasp. Behind us, heavy boots crashed through the dry, brittle leaves, and the sharp, unmistakable sound of a rifle being chambered cut through the evening air. I yanked her behind the massive, gnarled trunk of an old oak tree, and we pressed our bodies flat against the rough bark, our hearts a frantic, synchronized drumbeat against the wood. 20 yards ahead, hidden in the deepening gloom, was my first trap. We had to reach it before they fanned out, before they cut off our path. I counted to 3 in my head, a silent, desperate prayer, and then I pulled Arabella into a full, reckless sprint. She stumbled on a gnarled root, her small body pitching forward, but I hauled her back to her feet without breaking stride. The high-tensile fishing line I had so carefully and painstakingly strung between 2 closely set trees was completely invisible in the fading light. "Down," I screamed, dropping to my knees and pulling Arabella down with me, hard. We hit the ground just as the heavy, pounding footsteps of our closest pursuer reached the trap. He hit the line at a full run. The monofilament, thin but incredibly strong, caught him directly across the throat. He went down with a sickening, gagging sound, his body flipping over in a grotesque, cartwheeling motion, his rifle clattering away into the undergrowth. We scrambled on our hands and knees towards the relative safety of the creek bank while he rolled on the ground behind us, his hands clawing at his throat, his curses a series of choked, strangled gasps. The mud at the creek's edge was cold and thick, a welcome, primordial ooze. I scooped it up with both hands, the earthy smell a familiar, almost comforting, scent, and I began to smear it all over Arabella's pristine and horrifyingly visible white dress. She was shaking so violently her teeth were chattering, a rapid, clicking sound in the sudden, tense quiet. I covered the bright, telltale fabric with the dark, cloying mud, rubbing more on her pale arms and face, transforming her from a target into a creature of the earth. Her own palms, I noticed, were already scraped and bleeding from where I had so roughly pulled her to the ground. I ripped several long strips from the hem of my own dress, and, with a practiced efficiency born of countless self-administered first aid sessions, I wrapped them tightly around her small, injured hands. 3 rules, I whispered, my lips pressed close to her ear so our voices wouldn't carry. Stay low, breathe only through your nose, and follow exactly where I step. Do you understand? She just nodded, her eyes wide and terrified, and I knew she was too deep in a state of shock to truly process my words. But she was a survivor. I could see it in the way she held her body, in the way she watched my every move. From the woods to the east, a voice, calm and professional, cut through the sounds of the forest. Trevor, grid coordinates 4 Alpha. Target appears to be heading west, towards the creek. I recognized the voice from the pre-hunt gathering. Trevor, the one with the compound bow. The one who wasn't just a drunk, sadistic tourist. The one who actually knew how to hunt. His voice, in its calm, detached professionalism, scared me more than all the others' drunken whoops combined. We crawled along the muddy creek bank, staying low in the reeds, the cold water seeping into the knees of my own torn dress. My searching hands found the cool, smooth metal post of the first night vision camera, and I rose up just enough to reach the mounting bracket. The screws, which I had so carefully loosened during my prep walk that morning, gave way with a single, satisfying twist. I tilted the entire camera housing upwards, towards the dark, empty sky, and then, for good measure, I smeared a thick, opaque layer of mud across the lens. That would give us a crucial blind spot, a dark corridor that led to the hollow log where I had stashed my real supplies. We would have to circle back for it, but at least we wouldn't be watched. Arabella grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin, and pointed back the way we had come. A series of flashlight beams were now sweeping through the trees, their bright, white cones cutting through the darkness, perhaps 50 yards behind us and closing fast. We had to move, and we had to move now. I pulled her into the shallow, fast-moving water of the creek, and we began to wade upstream, the icy current a shocking, painful jolt to our already cold bodies. The water covered the sound of our ragged breathing and, more importantly, it washed away our scent, a crucial defense against the more experienced hunters. About 100 yards upstream, my searching hands found the familiar, rough bark of a fallen oak and the crude X I had scratched into it that morning. The hollow stump, my hidden armory, was just behind it, camouflaged by a pile of dead leaves. Inside was everything I had so carefully and illegally acquired over the past few weeks: 3 razor-sharp box cutter blades, each one meticulously taped to a sturdy, hand-carved wooden handle, a roll of clean, sterile gauze from my mother's untouched first aid kit, and a small, precious book of matches, wrapped tightly in a plastic bag to keep them dry. I pressed one of the makeshift knives into Arabella's small, cold hand. "Hold it like this," I whispered, showing her how to grip the handle. The blade pointed out and down, a small, deadly extension of her own hand. "Only use it if someone grabs you. Understand?" She was crying now, silent, hot tears mixing with the mud and creek water on her face, but she nodded, her grip on the small weapon surprisingly firm. A scream, not a hunting cry, but a sound of pure, unadulterated pain, ripped through the woods from the south. Someone had found my punji stick pit. The sharpened, fire-hardened branches I had so carefully planted weren't deep enough to be lethal, but they would go straight through a heavy hiking boot and into the soft, vulnerable flesh of a foot and calf. The screaming continued, a high-pitched, almost animalistic sound, and I heard the other hunters' voices, a chorus of confusion and alarm, rushing toward the sound. "What the expletive?" one of them yelled, his voice a mixture of anger and a dawning, delicious fear. The little expletive set traps. Now they knew. Now they knew I wasn't just running. I was fighting back. My mother's voice, that same, calm, and infuriatingly businesslike tone she used for everything from negotiating contracts to ordering takeout, carried through the trees. She was on her phone, a ghost in the machine, orchestrating our potential deaths from a safe distance. "Yes, both packages are still in play," she was saying. "Premium rates will apply for a successful completion before midnight." My stomach burned with a rage so hot and so pure I thought I might throw up. She was negotiating our deaths, our murders, like it was a pizza delivery, a transaction with a bonus for speedy service. I wanted to scream at her, to unleash every ounce of my hatred and my pain. But Arabella, her small, trembling hand still in mine, needed me to be smart, to be strategic, to be the hunter, not the hunted. The creek curved ahead, and in my mind's eye, I could see the path of rocks I had mapped out during my practice runs. "Step exactly where I step," I told Arabella, and she nodded, her eyes wide with a desperate, absolute trust. The first rock was stable, but the second, I knew, would shift and tilt if you hit it on the wrong side. The third was solid. I skipped the fourth entirely and landed on the fifth with my left foot, a silent, graceful leap. Arabella followed my movements perfectly, a small, mud-caked ghost in my wake. The water, rushing around our ankles, covered the sound of our breathing and continued to wash away our scent. Upstream, about 200 yards, was a small, dilapidated maintenance shed, a potential sanctuary of shelter and supplies. We could make it, I knew, if we just stayed in the water. Behind us, more shouting, and then Trevor's voice, cutting through the chaos with a calm, chilling authority. "Shut up and listen," he commanded his less disciplined companions. "They're smart enough to use the water. You two, follow the north bank. We'll take the south." He was a real hunter, and he was adapting. This was a chess game now, and he had just made his move. At the fork where the small creek split into 2 even smaller streams, I stopped. The left path was a more direct route to the shed, and I knew every hiding spot along its banks. The right path was longer, more circuitous, but it offered more cover, a denser, more tangled undergrowth. I looked down at Arabella's small, pale face, her eyes still wide with a terror that was now mixed with a dawning, steely resolve. In that moment, the choice was easy. We were a team. We stayed together no matter what. I wasn't letting go of her hand. We took the right fork, moving slowly and carefully through the freezing, ankle-deep water. The cold was a constant, gnawing pain now, and I could see Arabella's lips beginning to turn a pale, bluish color. She stumbled on a sharp, unseen rock, and a small, choked cry of pain escaped her lips. A jagged gash was now sliced open on her knee, the blood a dark, almost black, stream mixing with the clear creek water. I pulled her behind a large, moss-covered boulder, where the creek bank curved, a small, temporary pocket of concealment. I took the precious gauze from my pocket and wrapped it as tightly as I could around the cut, the pristine white fabric immediately turning a dark, angry red. As I worked, I taught her our signals, a silent language for the hunt. 1 squeeze means stop, I whispered. 2 means danger. 3 means run like hell. She squeezed my hand back twice, her small fingers surprisingly strong. She understood. The wound wasn't deep, but it was bleeding enough to leave a trail if we weren't careful, a death sentence in these woods. I cupped my hands to my mouth and made that same, high-pitched whistling sound my mother had so cruelly taught me to use to make the hunts more exciting, a sound designed to reveal my position. The whistle echoed off the rocks and the trees, not from where we were, but from the west, from the other side of the creek. 2 of the hunters, the less disciplined ones, immediately started yelling at each other, their voices bouncing and echoing, their confusion a welcome, if temporary, advantage for us. They would waste precious time searching the wrong area. We kept moving, my own body now a symphony of pain. My feet were numb, my hands were raw, and my muscles were beginning to cramp from the cold. Then, something caught my eye, a glint of metal stuck in a tree trunk at head height. An arrow, its fletching a bright, garish color, still vibrating slightly from the force of its impact. Trevor's work. He had missed us by inches, his shot a silent, deadly whisper in the dark. I worked the arrow free, my cold-numbed fingers clumsy but determined. The carbon fiber shaft was expensive, perfectly balanced, the razor-sharp broadhead tip a thing of brutal, efficient beauty. Now it was mine. Now we had a spear. Through the trees, I could hear it, the low, almost subliminal hum of the generator that powered the network of night vision cameras my mother had so thoughtfully installed. The sound, which had once been a symbol of my imprisonment, was now a beacon, a sonic map that helped me orient myself in the disorienting darkness. I knew exactly where we were. And I knew exactly where we needed to go. I knew how to cut the power. We scrambled out of the creek, the cold air hitting our wet, mud-caked clothes like a physical blow. I led Arabella through a thick, thorny patch of brush toward the source of the generator's hum, the electrical hub that was the nerve center of my mother's surveillance system. My hands were so numb from the cold, I could barely feel the makeshift knife in my grip, but I managed to get the box cutter blade out and began to saw at the thick, rubber-coated cable that fed the entire eastern bank of cameras. The rubber was tough, and my frozen, clumsy fingers kept slipping, but finally, with a surge of desperate strength, the blade bit through to the copper wires beneath. A shower of bright, angry sparks flew, and in the distance, I saw 5 of the small, red camera lights blink out at once, plunging a significant portion of the woods into a welcome and deeply satisfying darkness. We now had a dark corridor, a blind spot that would lead us to the northern fence. The hunters were shouting to each other now, their voices a chaotic, disorganized mess of confusion and frustration. They hadn't expected any real resistance, and their communication, their entire strategy, was breaking down, their judgment no doubt clouded by the whiskey they had been so freely consuming. I counted 4 distinct voices, which meant 1, Trevor, was staying quiet, was circling wide, was trying to cut us off. His silence was far more terrifying than their loud, drunken blustering. As we moved through our newly created corridor of darkness, I spotted another of the trail cameras my mother had mounted low on a tree trunk, a silent, digital witness designed to capture footage of us crawling or hiding. I pocketed the SD card, along with 2 others I found nearby. Evidence. A story for a world that would, if we survived this, finally have to listen. Arabella, her small body trembling with a mixture of cold and fear, tugged on my sleeve. She whispered her first, full sentence to me since we had started running, her voice a small, broken sound. "My sister," she said, her words so quiet I almost missed them. "He'll hurt my little sister if I don't make him money." The weight of her words, the crushing, unbearable burden of protecting not just herself, but another, innocent life, hit me like a wave of ice water. Her handler, like my mother, had leverage. We weren't just running for our own lives. We were running for the lives of children we had never even met. I squeezed her hand 3 times, a silent, shared acknowledgement of the impossible stakes. The tall, familiar pine tree I had taught myself to climb during the long, lonely hours between hunts was just ahead. Its branches started low to the ground and grew close together, a perfect, natural ladder. I boosted Arabella up first, her small, light body surprisingly easy to lift, and then I followed, the rough, unforgiving bark scraping my palms raw. From 20 feet up, perched precariously on a swaying branch, I could see the entire, chaotic chessboard below. 3 of the hunters were now clustered together near the main trail, their flashlight beams a tangled mess as they argued, their voices a low, angry murmur. And then I saw the 4th light, moving in a wider, more strategic pattern to the west. It was Trevor. He was trying to herd us, like deer, back toward the others. But I knew these woods, every creek, every hollow, every hidden path. And I knew his plan had a fatal flaw. I pulled out the cheap, burner phone I had found in my mother's car weeks ago during a supply run, a secret I had kept even from her. The battery icon was a single, ominous sliver of red, but it was enough. My cold, numb thumbs, clumsy and slow, typed out a single, desperate text to 911. Kids hunted. Armed men. Woods at coordinates. The screen went black the moment I hit send. But maybe, just maybe, it was enough. As we climbed down from the tree, a new sound cut through the night, a distant, mournful siren. It could have been anything, a fire, a medical emergency, a false alarm. But it was a sound of the outside world, a sound of hope. My mother's air horn blared then, a series of 3 short blasts, followed by 2 long ones, a coded signal I knew all too well from her training sessions. It was the signal to move towards the eastern boundary, where the fence was lowest. I turned us west, deeper into the woods, using her own system against her. The siren was getting closer now, its wail a rising, hopeful crescendo. My mother's voice, now frantic, crackled over a walkie-talkie she must have taken from one of the hunters. "We need our story straight before they get here," she was saying. I grabbed the walkie-talkie we had found earlier and pressed the talk button. "We have the SD cards," I said, my voice clear and strong. "And we have the receipts from your safe." The silence that followed was a symphony of her dawning, panicked horror. A whoosh of heat and light erupted from the slope above us. She had set the woods on fire, a last, desperate act of destruction. Through the orange, flickering glow, I saw Trevor, limping but still moving, his bow drawn, an arrow nocked and ready. The sirens were deafening now, the flashing red and blue lights painting the trees in a strobing, surreal light. I grabbed the last, clean piece of my torn, white dress, and I stood up, waving it above my head, a flag of surrender and of defiance. The police arrived, and the world dissolved into a blur of uniforms, shouting, and the sweet, beautiful chaos of our rescue. My mother, still trying to spin her lies about trespassers, was silenced. Trevor and the other hunters, wounded and defeated, were taken into custody. And we, the 2 small, mud-caked and bloodied girls in torn white dresses, were finally, blessedly, safe. The trial, months later, was a formality. The evidence, the SD cards, the financial records, the testimony of 2 young girls who had become warriors, was overwhelming. My mother was sentenced to life in prison. The hunters, including Trevor, received sentences that would ensure they would never again have the privilege of hunting anything. Arabella and her little sister were placed into a safe, loving foster home, their handler and his entire trafficking ring dismantled by the investigation our case had triggered. I was placed with a kind, older couple, my own foster family, who taught me, with a quiet, patient love, what a real home felt like. The scars, both physical and emotional, are still there. But so is the strength. My name is Grace. I am a survivor. And for the first time in my life, I am free.